Can you introduce yourself, talk about what boarding school you went to, how long you were there?
Sure. I'm Sanjali. I went to TISB. I was there between grade 8 to grade 12. I did my secondary education. I think part of my high school. I spent it there. Unfortunately, it was COVID between grades 11 and 12 because I was the batch of COVID. I was the batch of 2021, so that's right. I did my entire IB diploma. Yeah, that's a little back.
Why did you choose to go to boarding school? Like, what was it about it that appealed to you?
So I came from a tier 2 city. I came from
Okay.
a city called Nagpur. There was some schools, but there was no really IB school or even a school which gave me, access to good extracurricular activities. I think the education there was pretty traditional in nature and it was quite academic. So I think, and for me, TISB wasn't a very well thought for decision. It was a very random decision which came across with the pamphlet coming through because my brother was just amazed by the infrastructure of the school, if I'm being very honest. And I just told my parents, can I please apply to this school? If I get in, it looks like, was it really like Hogwarts and Merrill Towers? Of course it wasn't, but
Yeah.
really that was the thought behind it.
Yeah.
So
I think I remember hearing about TISB because I played a basketball tournament in Kodi, and they had come over there and they actually won the tournament. So
yeah,
I was like, I was really blown away because I'd never seen such. They were just super tall and super athletic. I was just like, this is kind of
call themselves the Trojans.
the Trojans.
I think they still go with that.
Okay.
They're very proud of their basketball team and their football team, I think.
Yeah.
Hockey also, the boys team was pretty good. I don't know about the girls team. When I was there, it was okay. But sport was kind of like a more it was competitive yet casual. I think at TISB
Okay.
you had the option to sort of, play if you wanted to play just for a hobby because as a bowler you got access to all the courts and those facilities. And as somebody who wasn't very athletic, I think I still got to try a bunch of different sports. I played everything from volleyball to netball. I didn't even know netball was a sport which existed before I went to that school. So I think the exposure was really quite nice in terms of sport. And obviously, there was the competitive side of things where people were swimming competitively, they were playing basketball, they were playing. So there was, and people were doing track competitively. Obviously, all of this was on a very school level, sort of school level. I wouldn't say it was very district or international.
Okay.
There weren't a lot of kids going out there to play sport at a very competitive level.
Right.
And the school was known for its academic rigors. So
Okay.
yeah, sport was an important part of, I think, overall team building and capacity building and bringing that community together.
Yeah.
So we had these two community-driven sports events. There was JBPL. These were two events that were organized just for boarders living in the facility by the boarders. So there was JBPL, which was a junior boys Premier League, essentially for the junior boys boarding house for middle schoolers to come in and have like their own internal teams for the boarding community. Have a small championship, and there was JG. Yeah, I think that's what it was called. It was the Basketball League, Junior Girls Basketball Association, sorry, GGBA. Yeah, it's quite an interesting concept. So all border girls staying in the boarding dorm were sort of distributed into their own teams.
Right.
Everybody got a chance to sort of feel that competitive
Yeah.
vibe. There were food carts coming in from outside, which again was quite refreshing because as boarders, you don't get exposed to
Absolutely.
outside food as often. But I think, yeah.
I mean, I just wanted to. So you talked about how you had hoped it was like Hogwarts, right? Like, what were your expectations before joining? How did they change? How were they flipped?
I think in terms of my expectation, see, when I looked at the entire situation, when I look back at the entire situation back then, it was a lot about just the infrastructure that I was basing my decision on because nor was I very well versed with curriculums like the IGCSE or the IB at that point in time.
Right.
They were very new curriculums. I actually didn't even know what did IGCSE stand for or which part of the world did it come from. So it was not a very informed decision for my family. It was overall a very holistic development, holistic growth. sort of situation. I think once I went there, also that ethos sort of followed through. It was a very, very competitive boarding school. I would say that in terms of its academic rigor, there was always this competition, or there was always this need to sort of be the best, which could
Right.
at times be quite debilitating as
Okay.
well, because it was actually internal competition, right?
Mm.
And I think it could also benefit scholars which are like society, I would say academically like average, because it gives you that push, right? Like everybody's sort of doing the best, and to sort of stand out, you need to be the best in that environment.
Yeah, of course.
So I think in terms of that expectation, obviously it transcended, but it wasn't Hogwarts. It wasn't the school of witchcraft and wizardry.
Yeah.
It wasn't as I think interesting as I thought it would be, and I think that was because it was a mix of a boarding and a
Day school. Okay.
community. So that brings in that divide, because I feel like day scholars get a lot more freedom and leverage
Yeah.
to go out there, do things, spend time
Yeah.
with family. I think boarding has its own charm in that
Right.
sense, though, like that you live with your friends and you become a lot more adaptable.
Mm.
But overall, because of this sort of setting, right, where
Yeah.
there were more day scholars in number as compared to the school and boarding,
Yeah.
I feel like it wasn't all that too holistic in terms of extracurriculars. Like if I had to put it in I'm at a lack of better words right now, but if I had to put it in slightly better words, um there was a lot to do, but it wasn't like really impactful. I think one of the things that I see parents these days have a lot of questions about, or students a lot these days have a lot of questions about, is that how are we going to, make sure that our extracurriculars are up to the mark, and not
Right.
just from the point of view of holistic development, but also from the point of view of getting into college and college admissions,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Because TISB is a feeder school to a lot
Right.
of good universities, but what was surprising was that what the meat that goes into your story was not actually taught. Like we weren't given enough opportunities to sort of uh, get those kind of opportunities within school. Like everything that we were doing was sort of at a mid-level impact. It was pretty generic. There wasn't standout activities. To give you an example, Kodaikanal has these treks around the hills that they have, and that's an integrated part of their curriculum.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
TRSB didn't have that because it was right in the center of urban Bangalore. You couldn't
Okay.
let students go out
Right.
ad hocly. You would have to have a lot of structure.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of expectations, it was like a traditional school. It was not a magical place,
Yeah.
but I think it was definitely a very wholesome experience by the end of it, because for me, it really worked out as an individual, because I needed that academic push towards my academics. I needed that sort of competitive edge to, and it really taught me how to plan my plan B before planning a plan A.
That's kind of incredible. I think
Yeah.
you're talking about a side of boarding school that I personally have never experienced. I've been fortunate enough to have a school in the mountains, kind
Yeah.
of like Cody, right? Cody is actually our sister school, Woodstock's sister school. And it's interesting to kind of get this insight because Woodstock's a pretty laissez-faire attitude.
Yeah, I think.
You know?
Yeah, but I think you get the opportunity to step out into
Exactly.
your surroundings, because it's in
Exactly.
Missouri, again, a small rural
Exactly.
area as compared to a very urban boarding
Yeah,
school.
true.
So I don't think it's a negative, but I think that's definitely one should keep that in mind before deciding upon whether a TI is.
Environment matters a lot. If I think the benefit maybe of being in urban Bangalore is you're a little bit more accessible. I feel personally that Woodstock is pretty far away. It's like a 2 hour, like 3 hour car ride from an airport, so it can be a bit, and it's on a hill. In terms of everything else, I think TISB sounds fantastic, right? Like academics has actually been Woodstock's weak point for a long time. So it's really
Yeah.
interesting to hear about that competition, that rigor.
Yeah.
Because we've only more recently started to shift our focus towards academics.
Yeah, I think with TISB academics was at the heart of their
Right.
focus. I think our faculty was phenomenal.
Mhm.
We had some really good teachers who made our coursework really interesting. Like even in terms of IB English Lit and Lang, right? I did that about 6 years back, but I still remember each and every component of my coursework, because I remember my English teacher walking into class and just going like, "Today we're gonna use Kendrick Lamar's songs as our non-literary pieces," and everybody just looked at each other and we were like, "Wow." So I think in terms of like the academics, they did
Yeah.
really try to preserve the fun element.
Okay.
Teaching was fun. I really quite liked a lot of my faculty.
Okay.
In terms of, I think, even college counseling at a later point in your life when you reach a grade 11, they teach you how to do a lot of things on your own. So you get a lot of ownership over your process,
Wow.
right? So they teach you how to make a strategic college list.
Okay.
So your expectations are very clear cut, and I think even in terms of like TRSB is very strategic with where their applicants internally apply. So if let's say 5 kids are applying to Ivy League colleges,
Right.
they wouldn't be applying to the same to
Yeah,
cancel out the
of course, right.
college counselors were very cautious internally
Yeah.
about factors like that.
Right. I think one of the biggest benefits to these boarding schools is their legacy and the connections, right? In terms of when you did talk about how TISB is a feeder school. I think most of the big boarding schools are in some sense because and that's kind of what makes them special in a way.
Yeah.
You know, I definitely wouldn't discredit them by any means at all because the big boarding schools definitely do have a lot of schools, but I think being feeder schools is also part of that offering.
Of course. And I think there are two types of boarding schools which primarily exist in India right now.
Yeah.
There are your feeder schools,
Okay.
which are primarily like, I would say a TISB and Doon school.
Uh-huh.
But I wouldn't distinguish the two kinds like that, right? I think there are slightly more liberal boarding schools and there are slightly more traditional boarding
Right.
schools. Wellim or Doon is a traditional. They don't give their students access to devices. There's limited access to the outside world. But when you look at a Cody, a Woodstock, a
Yeah.
TISB, you have plenty and enough of access to the outside world in terms of your phone time. You're
Right.
allowed to have your phones on you for at
Right.
least 2 hours of the day. I think it's a less rigid system in that sense that your routine doesn't start at 5 a.m. sharp, get up and go to a hockey field.
I agree completely.
I would wake up at a very normal school going time. I'd wake up at around 7:15 and
Yeah.
then rush to lunch, dinner, breakfast.
Yeah.
And then, have a very normal school day, come back from school, have 2 hours of chill time, either play a sport in that time or
But it was up to you, right? And it
a
was
lot more
yeah.
ownership. Yeah. But at the same time, I feel like TRSB did keep in that structure. Like we did have 2 hours of focused study time
Okay.
compulsorily
Yeah,
between
yeah.
6 p.m. to 8 p.m.
A study
every
hall,
single-
right? Like,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Okay.
It was called the golden hour. Quite ironic, in my opinion, because it was not really a golden
Yeah.
hour. It was a jail hour where you would sit in like just study and open.
You forced to do this? Like everyone had to study, or was it sort of more laissez-faire? Like, oh, we're gonna keep you in your rooms and you should.
No. It was more like a forced offering.
Okay.
But
Interesting.
I think that was very important
Yeah.
because that is what kept you in check, right? Otherwise,
Absolutely.
you wouldn't feel the need to study every day. I don't
Yeah.
think studying for 2 hours every day is a big commitment.
It's really
Big
not.
task.
It's
a
quite
very
normal. Actually, that's
lenient,
yeah.
decent ask.
Let's talk about like how you felt in boarding school in terms of your relationships. Do you ever feel lonely, overwhelmed, anything like that when you first joined?
I think I did. I think initially it took me a while to sort of adapt to the academic
Yeah.
rigor and also to sort of just adapt to the kind of students which were already studying there. When I say that, they were all academic kids who were just great at everything. They were good at academics. They were good at sport. There was really not much that they were not good at,
Yeah.
and that was quite debilitating. It was quite, you felt a little shaken up on the inside. Your confidence was overall
Right.
affected. That,
Right.
am I doing good enough?
Right.
Is what I'm doing even enough? I think one of my rather bigger dilemmas was I ever going to get into any college?
Okay.
To get a good college, because
Yeah.
not having the kind of grades that other students there did, or not having the kinds of grades or extracurriculars that the other kids had, I feel like that made me feel a little lesser, and it affected my confidence in ways
Yeah.
that I think was carried forward for quite a bit after school as well. I don't think it was just in that particular time frame, like it did leave a little bit of PTSD once I almost completed school. And like I think that was definitely something that I should have considered as somebody who was not as academically
Yeah.
brilliant. Was that the kind of push that I really needed to put me into where I am today?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there's an easier way. This is
It is intense. I think I was fortunate at Woodstock because everyone was as dumb or dumber than I was. So I was fortunate in that way. But I think it's interesting to hear this side of the story because I feel like, as most schools do, they advertise themselves in a certain way. But to hear about the behind the scenes of this kind of stuff, the way people feel about the actual things that go on in a board. And it was interesting also hearing about how it's less regimented than Doom School. Yeah, Doom School, they wake up at like 5 a.m., go do like sports, and then after that, they have breakfast and then they go about their day. Whereas in Woodstock, wake up whenever. I was late to most of my classes, and especially my senior year. And that kind of thing, I think, is a lot more chill in Woodstock, Cody.
I think as we had to maintain that balance also because of the day boarding
Right.
concept.
Ask also, what about, was there, you talked about a divide. Was that divide ever exemplified? Because I've heard stories of
I think it was
students.
quite evident,
Yeah.
if I had to be very honest. I think our faculty would always try to not have it be as evident. I think, but it also depended a lot on a batch to batch ratio.
Right, okay.
In terms of my batch, I think there was a good mix of day scholars hanging out with boarders as well. I think there was just a cool gang in school. Just
Everyone else.
yeah, just everybody else. So we did have a mixed bag of groups in my batch, but there were batches where like the boarding was completely secluded and it was a choice. It was
Okay.
nobody was pushed towards it. I think people just made that choice given that you live together with like a certain community of people.
Absolutely.
You inevitably get more attached to them. But I think because we were also the batch in COVID, we had that sort of attachment to our boarding friends, and then some people were also very, very close to day scholars.
Okay.
And the day scholar and boarding situation was also sort of flexible in DISB because of Bangalore is a big city, right? Now distances are huge.
Right.
So for some students to commute from one part of the town to another, it was really difficult. So they would be weekly boarders. They would stay 5 days in boarding and go back.
Yeah.
But in order to get that permission to leave your campus, you would have to have a lot of slips signed out.
Yeah,
you would have a legal
that's
guardian
true,
of
that's
your
true.
sort of approval.
Pick you up and
Yeah.
everything as well. Yeah, yeah. No, of course, of course. Now I want to talk about like what your values were strengthened by going to boarding school. Like what do you personally feel about yourself was made stronger by going to school?
Plan your plan before you plan your plan. Yeah, I think that is my biggest learning from this particular experience in my life because I think we were always pushed to plan the safety before
Right.
we achieve our dreams. Because what if your dreams don't work out? I think that reality check.
Okay.
In terms of the bigger, wider value system, I think the one thing that boarding school gave me was like the chance to bring myself up and like take a lot of opinions from a lot of people and build my own value system. So I didn't have to adopt the value system that my parents were sort of pushing down on.
Right.
Of course, I do take their legacy with great pride, and I
Yeah.
take elements from their legacy, elements
Yeah.
from their value system, but it also let me think independently
Yeah.
and build my own value system based on what people around me were thinking and what they were taught.
Yeah, no, that's something I relate with in a sense because I
Yeah.
feel like as kids, especially when I joined just a year before you, seventh grade, and I remember having in my head my parents were like superheroes, right? They can do no wrong, and then over time you sort of learn that hey, maybe this was wrong, maybe this
Yeah.
was wrong, and it's not necessarily a bad thing because it's an experience everyone
Yeah.
goes through. It can be difficult though because I feel like that distance between you and your parents definitely widens for a bit. At least it did for me. You wanna?
I think in terms of distance, I personally feel like I had a very mixed bond with my parents. I think they wanted me to have this experience. They wanted me to live it, make my own decisions. They wanted me to have
Yeah.
ownership of my journey from a very young age.
Yeah.
I think ownership was the biggest thing that
Not
yeah,
independent.
yeah, you have to go to college,
Yeah.
figure it out. You have to get the grades,
Yeah.
figure it out. We're not gonna do it. What we can do in turn for you is give you that emotional support. And I would also talk to my parents very frequently, and I've been living away from home for about 10 years now.
Okay.
I think like my boarding
Yeah,
school
yeah.
experience, then living away from home at university in Manchester, and then coming back to sort of Delhi and living
Right.
away from home here again. I feel that that entire experience, throughout this entire journey, I never felt detached to my parents, but I was never too attached
Okay.
either. I was not attached physically,
Mixed
but
bag,
I
like
was,
you said.
yeah. And I think that has actually made it a lot easier for me to accept loss, because by the end of it, the only person that I truly rely on, right? I don't have to rely on anybody else. Like I know I can trust my instincts and like figure my technical things out, but for the emotional bit, my parents are there. So I think that's a very it can go either ways, right? You can either experience at distance, or you have a very um attached bond with your parents. It's just a two-way street. It's just how they sort of inculcate, push forth that communication channel towards you, and just how accessible you are to resources as well to contact them, right? I feel like had I not had a phone time of 2 hours every day, I would probably not be that attached. I'd probably be even more detached, right? If I had gone to a Vellum or a Mayo. But given that I went to a TISB, because it was such a flexible system in terms of your phone time, in terms of your sort of laptop time, desk time,
It's different. It's really interesting hearing about the spectrum of both schools. We just had someone from Wellams. I went to Woodstock, and you've gone to TISB. And I feel like Woodstock is at the end of laissez-faire.
Yeah, I
Because,
think
I mean, we had our phones all day. We had it overnight also for a long time. We had our laptops all day, overnight again. And you know that's and it's a westernized, very, very westernized. And that's
100%.
something that's unique to Woodstock. But what that takes away from is that regimented way.
Yes.
How you talk about that 2 hours of study hall that you had. We had a similar thing. We had a study hall, but nobody really enforced it like that.
Yeah.
And so because they did for you, I think a lot of our students, we just messed around most of the time, and we would try to be quiet, but we would often mess around with our dorm parents. You know,
Yeah.
just because we could, and that's just the attitude that's over there.
100%. And I think just to add to what you're saying, right, that just having all of these different options doesn't mean to say that either of them is bad
I
or good.
completely agree.
I think it's just
Finding the right fit.
finding the right fit for your child. And I think the way you come down to that conclusion, in all honesty, is to see what would work the best for them. I
Yeah.
feel like had I gone to a Cody, I wouldn't have thrived. But I do
Oh.
know somebody who's gone to Cody, has thrived,
Yeah.
has gone to NYU
Yeah.
after that, has started her own startups.
Yeah.
So I think like in terms of, it's not like there's something that you can't do at a Cody or a Woodstock,
Right.
or you can't do that at a TISB.
Right.
But as an individual, what would work the best for your child, right?
Yeah.
Like if your child is somebody who's very
I love
regimented,
that.
self-regulated, then I think a Woodstock or a Cody would be a better
Yeah,
option
because
for
they
them.
would thrive there.
They would get to build
Yeah.
their ECs. I think Cody has some really unique offerings, and I'm sure even Woodstock does, right?
Naturally.
You have hills all around. You will be
Exactly.
trekking. You have great music teachers. You have faculty living in the campus, sort of, building a community
Yeah.
over years.
I completely agree. I think if you're academically oriented, if your kid is academically
Yeah.
oriented already, I think a better place for them would be somewhere where they
100%.
can build on those extracurriculars to a greater
100%.
extent.
And when I look at like a TISB, it probably might be better for somebody who needs that academic push. Yeah,
Right.
I think it could go down south as well, in the sense that it could leave you with a little bit of trauma, a little bit
Okay.
of, I think, the push, right? Like
Yeah.
not everybody can handle that
Yeah.
level of like, okay, sit and study for two hours a day. Like, if you have a sort of a learning disability, that makes it a little harder for you to cope with that setting. But
Yeah.
I think what I would say is that, like, if you can make it through that academic
Yeah.
rigor, if you have the right kind of emotional
Yeah.
support from your family, from your parents, I don't think it is something that, like, I don't think it's necessarily bad. I think it works in a plus for you. Then you learn how to, go about it through the tough way. You know how to handle that rigor, that push, right? And you also know how to sort of beat the competition without beating in the most conventional way. Like,
I think it's yeah.
and then
Honestly.
the school on the other hand will give you an entirely different. It would give you a military regime, almost
Right.
like
Very sports.
very
You're doing the
traditional archaic
academics.
boarding school
Yeah.
environment where you're like,
Yeah.
where
Definitely.
you're doing a lot of traditional extracurriculars. I'd be very honest. It's not even
It's
about
mostly
like,
sports kind of.
in fact or not.
Right.
It's about like building this value system which is built by the school.
I think with Wellams,
Yeah,
Wellams and Noon are quite similar in the sense that what they offer is a very,
100%.
very wide variety. Shepherd, academic. I was actually going to go to Good Shepherd as a kid. I'm so glad I didn't. I
Yeah,
would have
I
not. I would have not survived, frankly speaking. But yeah, just to close, I just wanted to ask you one last question. What would you like what advice would you give to the parents who are deciding to whether or not to send their kid to a boarding?
I think you should definitely make that choice because in India, our traditional value system is such that we make our kids a lot more reliant when they stay at home. We're
Very
used
true.
to
Familiar
handholding,
relationships.
yeah, handholding, mollycoddling. Like there's a lot of that which goes on in the back end of things.
Yeah.
And we sort of need to move away from that, shift away from that, so that our kids have more ownership of their own process. And so that we don't sort of tell them, okay, ballet class at 5 p.m., basketball at 6 p.m. No, the kid should be picking that up. Like ballet class at 6 p.m., I want to do this. If I have to do an XYZ activity, this is how I'm going to achieve that. I think that is something that boarding school teaches you, that attachment while having that detachment. I think it's very important to learn that. That should be at the crux of making that decision, because I think as globalization is expanding, as we're moving towards a more urban landscape, and even like even in rural settings, right, we're getting a more urban landscape. And I think how that helps is that every school is going to be good in every city. You're going to have a top school in every city. You're going to have a international school in every city. You're going to have a traditional Indian school in every city. So it's not no longer about academic rigor. It's really about the core value system that you want to instill in your child.
Yeah, I think it's very encapsulating of the, I want to say, the Indian human condition, you know?
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of kids are frustrated because they don't have ownership over their life.
Yeah.
It's a big reason that they don't know what they want to do, and they're kind of forced into careers that they're not interested.
Not just careers, I think everything is so like planned out to the T, right?
Yeah.
Like
A lot of them are
we have
spoiled as well.
strong passions, I
Yeah.
think. I
Oh,
think
extremely true.
I think it's very important to develop these things from a young age, and that's exactly what is going to, it's going to be an experience which could shape your child's thinking towards things, right?
Yeah.
For me, I feel like boarding instilled my passion for working for gender equality rights at a very young age. And like I have taken that forward till date, right? From volunteering at a domestic abuse and trauma helpline
Right.
to like doing other things for women, like in
Right.
a personal capacity, in a professional capacity. I think boarding school led me to find those passions at a very young age. So I think sending your kids out to a boarding school can really help them define themselves and their brand as individuals.